There was once a teenager who fell asleep all the time. I know what you're thinking. We've all heard that story. But this story is different. Bear with me. The teenager was falling asleep at dinner. He was falling asleep in class. He once fell asleep on a train and ended up 30 miles from home. His mum was not happy. She would constantly get frustrated at him. She would get calls from school telling her that her son needed to get more sleep. She was beginning to suspect that he was sneaking out at night. So for a whole week she stayed up late to see if he was leaving the house after she went to bed. For a whole week, nothing happened. Then she wondered if it was technology that was keeping him up. So she cut off the Wi-Fi at night. He sulked for a week, but he got over it. A few months went by and the problem persisted. Then, something happened. One morning she woke up earlier than usual and couldn't get back to sleep. She heard the front door close downstairs. She raced to the window just in time to see her son speed off on his bike. Alarmed, she reached for her mobile and called him again and again and again. No answer. So she waited impatiently for him to get back. When he walked back through that door, she was there and she was furious. She unleashed an angry tirade. He couldn't get a single word in. How dare you leave the house without telling me? How long has this been going on? Where are you going so early in the mornings? Are you a drug dealer now? And so the questions went on and on and on. He wasn't given an opportunity to answer any of them. She grounded him for the next month. Their relationship suffered a lot from then on. He would barely speak to her, no matter how hard she tried. For a whole year they just existed in the same household, and that was all. Later she discovered that her son was doing a paper round so he could buy his mum a gift. He was getting up very early in the morning to earn some money so he could surprise her. She never got the gift, and her relationship with her son suffered. Parenting is hazardous, and it is fragile. There are two reasons communication tends to break down between parents and their teenagers. The first is that teenagers are very reluctant to communicate with their parents. They are dealing with adolescence and it can feel like they are always misunderstood. In fact, feeling misunderstood is the natural default for a teenager. This is made worse by the fact that there will always be generational differences. The world you grew up in is completely unrecognizable in the context of the digital world teenagers today are growing up in. The rate of technological development and the impact that has had on the youth is unprecedented in human history. Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Uber and so on are less than 15 years old. Games consoles are more sophisticated than they've ever been. We now live in a world of algorithms and fake news. By the way, comment below if you'd like me to do a video on the impact of social media and algorithms on the next generation. But for now, it is enough for us to acknowledge that today's teenagers have no idea what the pre-social media, the pre-on-demand world was like. So the natural rate of generational change has accelerated massively. Combine this with the teenager's natural repulsion to communicating with parents, and you have a problem, a big problem. It's like trying to reason with the Hulk by talking to him in a language he doesn't even understand. It's asking for trouble really. In the words of Thomas Paine, to argue with a person who has renounced the use of reason is like administering medicine to the dead. I mean, it is a pretty gloomy metaphor, but it does capture how futile it can be sometimes to try and reason with teenagers. Have you ever tried to tell someone who is in love that they are making a mistake? Yeah, it's kind of like that. The second reason for communication breakdown is from the parent, and it breaks the golden rule of communication as laid down by the Greek Stoic philosopher Epictetus. What is the golden rule of communication? One word: listen. Listening isn't what it used to be. We tend to listen to respond. In fact, sometimes we're not even listening. We're just formulating in our minds what we want to say next, while the other person is talking. This means the quality of communication suffers. If I'm excited about telling you something, and before I get into it I ask how you are, chances are I'm not listening. I'm just waiting for a chance to tell you what I want to tell you. This happens between parents and teenagers all the time. If a child does something wrong, we've almost always got a response ready. That means we're not listening. This can be very problematic. Bad behaviour from teenagers is often a symptom of something else. There might be something that is worrying them. There might be something else that is going on in their lives. And when you tell them off, you can miss out on finding what could be the root cause of the problem. By telling a child off for what they have done or the way they are behaving, it's like dealing with the symptom instead of the cause. Don't mistake the symptom for the cause. For example, if you get persistent headaches, you could just take a painkiller every time that happens. But there is an underlying cause for those headaches, and until you find it, you will just have to continue to experience headaches. Your teenager's behaviour is the same. If there is a drastic change in your child, it could be that there is an external factor. For example, if your child's schoolwork is deteriorating, it can be caused by many factors. It does not necessarily mean there is a lack of effort. It could be stress, it could be low self-esteem, it could be social media pressures. And if you go into an interaction with a teenager like a bull in a china shop, then you're definitely not going to find out the cause of their behaviour. Sometimes we can do something that is even worse than not listening. We can project. Instead of viewing the situation objectively, we project a problem onto our children that is not there. It is the equivalent of two people having different conversations with each other at the same time. Hi, how are you? No, I don't like Brussels sprouts. It sounds bizarre when you look at it like that, but that is exactly what happens when we project. Once a parent insisted to me that her son was being bullied, and this had made him go into himself. And whenever she dealt with her son, it was the starting point that he was being bullied. So her responses and the things she said to him were based on that. However, he was not being bullied. And whenever he tried to speak to his mum, he would end up getting more and more frustrated until he just stopped telling her things. We think we understand the situation without actually getting enough information to inform that understanding. Imagine you're on holiday in Greece and you are looking for a specific restaurant. You ask someone for directions, but you think you have a rough idea where the restaurant is. So the person gives you directions, but you don't listen. You switch off, and in your head you're just imagining the way you think you need to go. So you follow your hunch. You walk around aimlessly for an hour and still end up not finding it. In the same way, you don't want to skirt around what your teenager is actually feeling. People see what they want to see. You may have heard about the selective attention test. There is a video in which a group of players pass a few basketballs around. The task is to count how many times they complete a pass. While you're focusing on this, a great big gorilla walks by and stops in the middle of these players. About 50% of people actually miss the gorilla because they are so focused on the players. You might find this crazy, but this is what happens when we're projecting instead of really listening. Listening is not just restricted to words that your teenager says. In fact, just 7% of communication is verbal. 93% of it is non-verbal. Voice and tone are very important. If your teenager's volume rises, you are dealing with something that is making them angry. If your teenager's pitch becomes higher, it could be that they are not being truthful, or you've hit something that is making them very uncomfortable. You must get to know your teenager so well and look for these non-verbal cues without projecting. Body language is also important. It reveals a lot. It gives context to absolutely everything. If someone says I love you and their eyes are sparkling, it is very, very different to someone saying I love you and then avoiding eye contact and shifting uncomfortably. Someone says I'm happy, but their arms are folded and they are scowling. Someone says I'm angry and then bursts out laughing. Body language reveals a lot more than the words themselves. If you want me to do a video on teenagers and body language, comment below and we'll make that video happen. The final tip on communication is not to get frustrated. Frustration blurs everything. It blurs rational action. As a parent, it is already almost impossible to view your child objectively. Parenting is the most subjective thing there is. Giving birth and raising a whole human will do that to you. That's why it can be easier to be fairer with other people's children than your own. If you add frustration to this, then you're headed for a brick wall. It is a signal for teenagers just to shut down, or worse, lie to you. Not getting frustrated is easier said than done, I know that. But you have to be careful not to let the day you've had impact how you deal with your teenager. If you've had a bad day, it is difficult not to let that affect your interactions. As a parent, you have to try even harder because you're dealing with a volatile teenager. If you take these things and implement them, you will see changes in the dynamic between you and your teenager. It is not going to be overnight. It is not a magic pill. But you'll see improvements over time. It might even save you some sleepless nights. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment. And more importantly, if you like what you saw, do not forget to join the parent revolution.